Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics Overtime. We just had too much to talk about. So we're back here. We're preparing our fantasy football lineups during the break. I have to admit, I just have to kind of throw a dart and pick. If I try to strategize, I lose every time. You guys are in a league together, right?
That's correct.
That is correct, but I came in below Andrew in the standings last year, so it would be great if we didn't talk about that too much.
Let's talk about another competition. We
There were
touched
also a lot of people that were above us in the standings.
Well, so we won't talk about it much unless you guys are at the top of the standings, and we'll probably hear about the trash talk on Facebook and Twitter. Let's talk about another competition that probably won't be as fun or collegial. It's the race for governor. You mentioned you're going to support Eric Greitens over Chris Koster. Why?
Well, first of all, Eric shares a lot of the same history that I have in my own personal life experience. He's a military veteran. He's served overseas. He's owned his own business. And now, for the first time in his life, he wants to run and serve in political office. I think that the conversation that's relative to the governor's race is going to come down. Both Chris Koster and Eric Greitens are going to be having to convince the voters of Missouri that they are able to provide a fresh perspective and a new direction for the state of Missouri. You know, we're trailing in a lot of economic indicators, and I think that case is going to be much more difficult for a guy like Chris Koster to make, who's been in public office for longer than some of our younger voters have been alive. So Eric's a new voice, and I saw that message resonate in my own race. I saw it resonate in Andrew's race, and we've seen it resonate around the country. So
Eric Greitens, a very impressive campaign. And an impressive person. And you said you'll be supporting for governor. Is it one of those things where you're supporting the Republican nominee because you're a Republican, or are you excited about it?
I'm excited about it. I think he'll do a good job. I think he'll bring some new ideas. I also think it's extremely important to elect to the St. Louis region to elect like-minded senators with Bill Eigel and I. It wouldn't have been good enough just to elect me or just to elect Bill. We need both of us there, and I think we can work well with Mr. Greitens.
Is some of the things he's done, we touched on ethics earlier, he probably doesn't come into the legislature after accepting the largest contribution in the history of the state anonymously with a big stick to talk about ethics. Maybe there's some things you could tell him about ethics.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things with ethics is we have to have transparency. I think transparency is very critical. The voters have to know.
Do you think you'll be able to explain that to him, that transparency is important? Is that something he'll listen to you when you tell him? Well, no, transparency is very important, and we need to ban the types of things, the practices he's using in his campaign.
Yeah, I can't tell you.
Let's talk about one other thing real quick. There's been you had just a few months ago, you had Deal, Schmidt, Dempsey all in the legislature. Next year, you may have Eric Schmidt in the executive branch, but there's a new generation of leadership taking office in the metro area, and I want to know, what is the top issue from just the St. Louis metro area, when CEOs, when the RCGA, when Civic Progress, now they're going to be calling you, and I know they've called you in the past, but now you're one of the top elected officials in the majority party that represents the state's economic engine. What do you see as the biggest issue you can impact? You
know, I think when it comes to economic issues, it's not one thing. It has to be a collective of things, whether it's tax reform, regulation, and employment law. You need all three of those things for businesses to prosper. And I think it's also really important that we have like-minded people in both the House and the Senate. And from the St. Louis region, I think Senator Onder, myself, and Bill Eigel will work well together.
Bill Eigel, when you go to the majority caucus in the Senate and you guys come up with your priorities, what are you going to communicate back to the CEOs and the business leaders in St. Louis, in this metro area? Because you'll be one of the people they're calling and depending on. And one thing I've always thought was interesting, there's no free state government cheese in Sedalia without a healthy St. Louis metro area pumping the money in to pay for that.
Absolutely. And you know, the issues facing the St. Louis region are the same issues facing the entire state of Missouri. We're trying to ask ourselves what policies are going to attract population, people, and jobs to the St. Louis area and across Missouri. And Andrew, when he talks first, it's easier for me because he's hitting on the same themes. Yeah. He's talking about tax reform. You know,
people seem to be on the same page.
Absolutely. You know, folks are going to places like Texas and Tennessee because they don't have an income tax. So we need tax reform, labor reform, policies like right to work. Those states are consistently doing better than states that haven't passed right to work. So there is a similar theme and a similar need across the state, and it's not just the St. Louis area, and we're going to be giving the same answers, I think, as my colleagues in rural areas.
Want to thank both of you. Likely senators come January. Hope you'll come back in this most interesting campaign season to talk about on This Week in Missouri Politics. And we would love having you back when you're in the Senate. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with the TWMP Overtime Opinion Maker panel segment.